My horoscope said this week was going to be bad. And
Me
it was
too.
right.
My horoscope said this week was going to be good, and it was so wrong. I'm very disappointed.
Okay. Andrea, let's start with the summary. Okay.
Okay, so obviously a streetcar was a little different than anything else we've read this year because it was more of a current play. So it starts out Blanche comes to visit her married sister in New Orleans, however is surprised by her living conditions, her husband, and life compared to how they grew up. But Stella is very content with her life. In fact, she's even pregnant. Tensions begin to form between Stanley, which is Stella's husband, and Blanche, though. Stanley thinks that Blanche cheated Stella out of her fortune of their lost plantation, and Blanche thinks that Stanley is not good enough for Stella as he hit her when he was drunk at a poker game. In the meantime, Blanche starts falling for a man named Mitch who is friends with Stanley. They both feel like they need each other. However, Stanley ultimately sabotages this love as he tells Mitch dirt he found. Blanche is upset by this and drinks a lot one night. Stanley comes home from the hospital and is very excited because Stella just had the baby, or is having the baby, except things kind of go off the wrong end, and Stanley ends up raping Blanche, and then ultimately Blanche tells Stella, but Stella doesn't really believe her, and instead sends Blanche to be taken away by a doctor. Okay, so my first question is, who do you guys like better, Stella or Blanche, and kind of in comparison, if you want to compare the two? Because I wasn't really sure who I like better, so yeah, Alan.
Okay, well, I was just looking at my commentary, which I kind of wrote about who was the antagonist and who was the protagonist in the novel. And I talked a lot about how even though Blanche, and besides the point that like Stanley tend to be kind of the instigators of conflict, I kind of thought Stella was more of the bad guy because she just kind of sat there and did nothing all the time. Like, she couldn't really like pick a side. Like, she kind of was like wishy-washy and went back and forth from taking Blanche's side to taking Stanley's side, and she couldn't really make a stance about anything or stand up for herself, which I think, like, even though Blanche, like, lies a lot and, like, you know, is a little, like, eccentric, I thought I kind of, like, disliked Stella more because she, like, couldn't really do anything for herself.
She didn't do anything as opposed to Blanche, who did everything.
Well, yeah, and she just also, she couldn't kind of, like, take a stance for what she believed in, and she couldn't really, like, you know, make up her mind about who she wanted to support.
Camille.
Well, one thing I noticed as well, I talked about this in my commentary, was the fact that Blanche is like this outwardly kind of, you know, ridiculous, insane, dramatic person, whereas Stella is supposed to be the one who's more down to earth and calm and, you know, reasonable. But I think that, like, if you look at them in conjunction with one another, the thing that's interesting about it is that, like, Stella is really the one who's kind of more naive about reality. Like, Blanche, you know, is kind of open about what happened to her. Like, when Mitch confronts her, she actually tells the truth of, like, what happened. Whereas Stella, you know, is unable to accept the fact that her husband might have raped her sister, so she just kind of sends her problem away to, like, kind of run away from her own reality.
Jackie.
I wrote my entire commentary about how they both, like, deny their reality, and, like, Stella, like, when she gets beaten by Stanley, like, hit, she says that I'm not in anything I want to get out of, and she says that slowly and emphatically, and that's like scene 4, page 74. And then Blanche is like, as if nothing out of the ordinary happened, so it's kind of like, Stella's denying that that she's in an abusive marriage, and then Blanche, like, blatantly lies all the time and calls herself, like, this aristocratic, intellectual woman who's, like, and like, she, like, puts on a show that she's so above them in class when she's not.
Do you think there was, well, this is for anyone, do you think there was, like, a turning point when your feelings towards one or the other one changed, and you started to like one more, or just like one more?
I started hating Blanche, but then I grew to like her as you learn the backstory, and I started, like, thinking that Stanley was, like, the everyday working guy, and then he turned into a rapist and into an abuser, and that kind of went downhill from there.
I would have to agree.
I actually don't really like either of them, which I think, like, I don't think they're meant to be likable characters because I think they both have, like, really, like, not awful, but, like, problems with themselves. Like, I think Blanche is just, like, outwardly rude, and I think she's delusional, and it bothers me that she, like, couldn't find reality, but it also bothered me that Stella couldn't like stand up for herself or her sister. So I think they're both like equally unlikable.
Megan?
Well, I agree with Rachel. I don't think either of them are particularly likable characters, but I think, like as readers, you start to pity both of them almost, and feel bad for them. Like, especially like the first point I felt that was when Stanley hits Stella for the first time, and she's so distraught about it and goes upstairs to Eunice. But then when he starts calling her, like she just comes down and it's like nothing ever happened and forgives him. So like it shows the control that Stanley had in the relationship, and that like Stella, and then you see it with Blanche and like her sanity and her relationships as well, that like they've both been so traumatized in their lives that they just completely lack control and are like taken advantage of, and just like are like pliable characters. Like they're not likable, they're just like kind of there, I feel like.
Do you think there's any part of them that's likable? Or
Well, I mean, there's definitely like certain aspects of them, like when Blanche comes, like she's so excited to see Stella, and like there's definitely things that readers can make connections with, like a sisterly bond, or like obviously like everyone goes through struggles in their life, but I just like as readers, like you just look at them and you kind of think like, what are you doing with your life, and like.
Kyle?
Yeah, we brought up the when Stanley hits Stella and then calls her and she comes down. It's really important in this scene to remember how they make up, which is having sex, because that's basically what their relationship is built on, right? They fight, they whatever, they have their traditional gender roles, and then they have sex and make up. Stanley, like all his interactions with every other female character revolves around sex, as we see with when he's first on with Blanche, like the insane sexual tension that goes on there. When he finally rapes her, which is kind of the culmination of that. When he makes up here with Stella, just by like falling on top of her and whatnot, it's clear that their relationship is built almost exclusively on like the be-all fix-all that is sex.
Zach?
And then just adding on to that, it's interesting that Stella's even conscious of that. She says, I won't find it on the page, but the quote is, she says like there's like things that happen between a man and woman, and that makes the rest of that scene not important. So it's, yeah, she's very conscious that she's willing to say the same like for purely physical reasons.
Yeah, they were like talking about that when Stanley wanted Blanche to leave. He was like, we haven't been able to do whatever.
He says, yeah, he brings that up too.
That was like, I think what I talked about. Sophia?
There's this quote on, I think it's page 41, and I think Blanche says, I'm looking for it, but I'm not seeing it, I see it in my notes. But a woman's charm is illusion, and I think that both Blanche and Stella, both have a different sort of illusion that they're trying to make work for them, but by the end of the book, they both kind of realize that, like, neither works, like, just being honest is. But it was also interesting because I think that Stanley isn't honest. Like, we get to know him as a character that is honest, and it doesn't work out for him in the end because, like, he's just, like, a really bad guy, but his impressions of people are usually pretty, like he calls Blanche out for being inauthentic from the very beginning, and that was impressive. And then Blanche and lost. Never mind. I'll come back.
Okay.
Just a quick thing, I am keeping track of it. It wasn't posted at first, but now it's shared with you. So if you want to keep track of the transcript, because you were going somewhere with that. So.
I know I lost my. This week is not good.
Claudia?
Yeah, I don't know, I thought Sophia was kind of interesting, a good point there, which is like how a lot of the characters are actually kind of like the opposite of what they may seem. Like we talked about how like Stella seems down to earth, but she really has these like fantasies and she's so completely like enraptured. Mm-hmm. And like Blanche, you know, maybe puts on airs, but she's aware of the fact that she's putting on airs. And I think Sophia kind of brought it up in relation to Stanley. You know, he's so portrayed as like this, like from the start, like he portrayed, you know, maybe kind of more as like, oh, the working man, like but he like there's at some point, I mean, or even when he like, you know, throughout the book will accuse Blanche, like, oh, like you're such a queen, like, you know, you think you're better than me. Yeah. And so he's like set up as the working man, but you see that like as, you know, the book goes on, he is actually not in this lower position. Because he's a man and he's, you know, beating his wife and raping his wife's sister, he's actually in this really position of power. And I mean, it gets to the end where he, you you know, kind of makes a proclamation that like reveals his true nature, that he's like, oh, no, where he like declares that he's the king, in the house.
Every man is a king.
Yeah, or like that he's the king around here. It was on 116, but I read it all, so I don't know. But yeah, he just declares that he's the king and like you're not, you know, neither of you will be like the queen, like I have all the powers, basically what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely gender issues within the book, like inequalities or whatever, that is touched upon in that quote, I think. Liam?
I never really saw like Stanley as like being portrayed as like the average working man or just like a normal guy. Like I always felt there was something like off about him from, it was just after the first scene where he's getting really like angsty about the fact that he thinks like Blanche is holding out money on him, and I found him to be like very aggressive in that scene, and like I think from that moment on I saw that like he wasn't like an average working man, and he was like, there was a lot of greed and like desire kind of behind him.
I feel like he almost puts on a facade, like depending on who he's talking to, like you can definitely see the way he acts around Stella to try to be this nice working man, but the way he then like pressures Blanche to be like, tell me the truth, like what is he actually happening
Blanche puts on like a really large facade too.
Yeah.
And she's like always powdering her face with like cologne and makeup and wants to be like appear very proper when in fact she used to be like
Yeah. Greta?
I think speaking of Blanche, her like obsession with light is really significant as well, because she can never stand to be in direct light, and I think that also has to do with like obviously vanity and, you know, being older, but I think it reminds her of her past as well, and she's kind of just trying to live in this like alternate reality, and she's always drinking, so she's trying to like hide her sorrows and what she was before she came to live with Stella.
Andrea?
Yeah, going off of that, there's a quote on page 143 where Blanche says that the dark is comforting to her, and I think it just represents her like settling and not wanting to like stand up for herself or really acknowledge and accept what happened in the past and then move past it. So I kind of took that as like one of the main meanings behind the book, is like actually accepting the past and then you can move forward.
Yeah.
Well, this was discussed a while ago, I think Kyle was talking about it, but, how I think it's really interesting if we look at like the relationship between, Mitch and Blanche essentially like met its downfall because she wouldn't have sex with him, and that was kind of like something that wasn't expected during that time, and people like disrespected her so much once they found out that about her like past and her history, whereas like it's really contrasted with the relationship between Stanley and Stella, because like as we look at like their relationship isn't healthy like sexually or emotionally, and yet like that's kind of the thing that's holding them together and like keeping their marriage like strong, although it's not healthy at all. And so like there's kind of this contrast between like the characters and the way that they like look at themselves and how they like are seen through the eyes of other characters.
Yeah, I mean, just a quote that I found to go along with that, where Blanche says, like, they're talking about the night before, and she says, on the contrary, I saw him at his best. What such a man has to offer is animal force, and he gave a wonderful exhibition of that, but the only way to live with such a man is to go to bed with him, and that's your job, not mine. So basically, like, I think
Wait, who said that?
Blanche about Stanley. So basically, I think that kind of shows, like, I guess, well, I don't know, a question I guess I would have asked about that would be, like, what do you think, like, the root of Blanche and Stanley's kind of, like, tension, like, comes from? Like, is it because of the fact that she can't accomplish that for him? Like, she can't be, you know, like, a sexual object for him? Or is it because, like, they come from such different backgrounds and, like, he feels judged and threatened by her?
Well, I think that, you're asking me, I think it kind of has to do with, like, the aspect of, like, control, and, like, he has all this control over her, but, like, she can't do anything to almost, like, I don't know how to, like, stop his control or, like, put it to rest, like, make him content. But, I don't know, what does everyone else say? Rachel?
Okay, so I think I have two really quick points. One is to the fact that like she doesn't like being in direct light, and like she's always like wearing white, and like there are a lot of interesting like scenes with imagery. On page 59, she's talking to Mitch, and like she like saying her name and she's like, it's a French name, it means wood, and Blanche means white, and like she's like talking about like an orchard in the spring, and like white is like really traditionally like associated with like innocence and purity, which is like interesting because that's like kind of like the face that she puts on, but like we all know that that's not true. And the second thing is that this like kind of goes back to like a bunch of people's comments about how Stanley treats Stella. Is he's like very manipulative, and he's like using like all these like holding things over her head, like right from the beginning on page 32 he's talking about the Napoleonic Code, and like according to which what belongs to the wife belongs to the husband and vice versa. And like at first I thought that was interesting because like what could possibly like in this time like what could belong to a woman like because of the gender roles, but then like you know that like he comes from like a poorer background and he like works, and she obviously like Stella and Blanche are from like a richer family, so he like can take full advantage of that. And then he's like hitting her, and like meanwhile she's like so submissive, like it's so easy for him to manipulate her because she's like in denial like the fact that what he's doing is wrong, because she's trying to like construct this reality that like what's happening is okay. So like that's kind of I feel like a big component of their relationship is that like they work together because he like is so dominant and she's so like okay with everything.
Yeah, what I was gonna say, I think that's interesting you brought that quote in, because when I first read that, I kind of thought like, oh, like this marriage is really strong, like equal, like they share everything, but then it wasn't until like later in the book that I realized how dominant Stanley was over Stella, and how actually that quote made Stella so weak compared to him. Allie?
Well, just since we're talking about kind of like gender roles and like the role of like sex in the book, I was just wondering what everyone thought the significance of Stella being pregnant throughout the play was.
Well, I think it's interesting, it's not a big topic in the book, so I think, when someone, is, a couple is, expecting a baby, that's something, so, exciting and, a miracle or whatever, it's, prolonging life, and that in this relationship that, Stanley's still so abusive towards her and, neglectful, and that, that's the environment that the child is gonna grow up in. And then after, when Stella's in the hospital, Stanley comes home and gets drunk and then ends up raping his sister-in-law. And then, when the baby's finally born, there's never one instance of him, caring for her. So it shows, again, the gender roles that women were placed in this role of domesticity. And, I don't know, it just shows that, the relationship between them is not, very typical of, what you would see back then or even today. So.
This kind of, I'll ask my next question because it kind of relates to what Allie said about the role of sex just within the book. And I was looking at the part where Stanley actually rapes Blanche, and it's the quote on page 162. It says, she moans, the bottle top falls, she sinks to her knees. He picks her inert figure and carries her to the bed. The hot trumpet and drums from the four deuces sound loudly. What I thought was interesting about this quote is that it's obviously implied that Stanley rapes Blanche, but Williams doesn't actually come out and say it. So I was wondering why you think he doesn't come out and say it, considering it's in the stage direction. Rachel?
Well, I think you can connect it back to what Rachel was saying about shaping a reality, and sort of that it's something that you don't want to believe happened and is so awful that you sort of can't believe happened, but it's sort of has to be constructed into this reality that Blanche and I think Stella are trying to create.
Yeah.
So that's why we didn't come out and just say it.
Jackie?
Yeah, that's kind of how I interpret the whole novel. Even the baby, you can say that the purpose of that is the desire to have this whole new future where this kid can grow up in a world that isn't what Stanley and Stella have. And Stella wants to believe that her marriage is okay and that everything's okay. She wants to believe that her sister's just insane, not that her husband raped her. And it's kind of even upstairs on page 87, scene 5, they say, what's the matter with Eunice? She and Steve had a row as she got the police, asked Stella, and then Stanley says, nah, she's getting a drink, and Stella says, that's much more practical. It's practical to avoid reality, and we desire to not know the bad things or to pretend we don't know, live in a fantasy.
Yeah, definitely. Bill?
I think the whole avoiding reality theme definitely persists throughout the book, and I think that theme is what makes Mitch such he's sort of the difference to all of them, whereas he wants Blanche to like be in the light, and he wants to see her face, and he wants the truth, not like what Blanche wants everybody to know. So I think that's part of the reason why their relationship fails in the end, why Blanche wants Mitch to see her as how she wants to portray herself, but when he actually demands that they be true with each other, like she can't really handle it. So I just think that the whole avoiding reality theme will continue to persist regardless of how insistent Mitch is.
But I guess my question would be like, the stage direction isn't actually like, the stage direction, since the quote I read like it's in the stage direction, like it's not actually like lines in the play, so no character is explicitly like saying it, so why do you think he still avoided saying it? Rachel?
Okay, well, I think that like, keep in mind like this is a play that was like performed for people, like it's still really iconic and a lot of people like see it, and I think it's like kind of in poor taste to have like a scene that's like so graphic and like kind of like a showing not telling thing, or like telling not showing, that like it's kind of hitting the audience over the head with it, whereas like there's so much like detail and like the lighting and the like the sound and everything that like it comes across anyway, so like this is kind of subtle, and also like Rachel was saying, it kind of is like, you know it's there, but like it's kind of like you also don't believe it, which kind of mirrors how the characters feel, which I think, tying it back to your question about the significance of the baby, is kind of interesting, because it's really ironic that while Stella is like literally in labor and like giving birth, her husband is having sex with her sister, and like I don't know,
What kind of irony is that?
it's dramatic irony.
And a little bit. How is it also situational? You know what that?
Because they're in a situation, so.
They're in a situation. Yeah, we need to be more specific on something like the AP test, but that, keep in mind the terms,
Is it
okay?
situational irony, like difference between what is expected and what happens?
Mm-hmm. Because while she's having the baby and then that's happening, right?
So
You wouldn't
yeah,
expect that.
so just to like tie that back, it's like
Yeah.
we all know like this is gonna sound so weird, like where a baby comes from, and like there's like a lot of meaning there, and that like the baby is kind of like the physical consequence of the passion that like Stella and Stanley have been like basing their relationship on. And I think like the fact that the baby comes right after this whole thing happens is that it's interesting, because it finally is like the first time where Stella has to like make a choice, and that's when she when the baby's born, like that's when she sends Blanche away and says that like I couldn't believe her story and go on living with Stanley. So it's kind of like when she has like this like tangible like thing, that's like kind of how she like stops being wishy-washy.
I think that's a good point. Karen?
I think in terms of like the sound and why they specifically didn't like say that it was rape, and they just kind of played the trumpets, it kind of goes back to the theme about like this false reality that like Stella and Blanche try to live in. Like there's several instances throughout the play where sound is used to convey a message that like we can gather anyway, but you could plausibly deny. Like there's a scene where Stanley rapes Blanche and where he beats Stella, where all you hear is like the music or like sounds. So it's kind of like how they hear and experience these terrible things that happen with Stanley, but they can like plausibly deny it. And that's kind of why like Stella at the end, like even though Blanche tells her through like the speaking that like Stanley did these terrible things to her, she still like denies it, sort of just like live this fantasy life that she's living.
It's like they're afraid to face
Yeah.
their actual problems. Shelby?
I have some